For our second English club, we're going to stay down south, but move to the west side of London to talk about Chelsea Football Club. A lot has already been said about the success they've had this century, so in the interest of education, I'm going to lean more towards the things from their past that are not as readily known in America. They can boast this haul of silverware, including cups and domestic titles, with the key to our conversation about the past being that only one of the 6 league titles was won before the turn of the century. They're also one of England's most successful clubs in European competition, having taken 2 each of the Champions League, Europa League, Cup Winners' Cup, and the UEFA Super Cup. And that first Champions League triumph is where this kit comes from. You can see right in the center there, that embroidered, they have the location, date, and opponent from the final. So winning this final in 2012 was the first dramatic moment of success for a club that in the previous century had only spurts of success, mostly in cup matches. During the 70s and 80s and during stretches in the 90s, the club was pretty financially unsound. One of the pieces of Chelsea history that doesn't get talked about enough, in my opinion, is the fact that the club was purchased in 1982 by a man named Ken Bates, and he bought it for the grand total sum of £1. In the end, he sold the club in the early 2000s to Roman Abramovich, coming back up to the first division in the late 80s and starting to win some cups in the 90s before really getting things to come under order when Abramovich came on board, starting to pay down a lot of the debt that the club had amassed and then bringing in and injecting a lot of money to the club, as well as bringing in a manager named Jose Mourinho. Mourinho, or the Special One as he accidentally dubbed himself during an interview, having won the Champions League with FC Porto in what was kind of a David versus Goliath kind of run to the final that year, did have success with the club, didn't win the Champions League with them, but stabilized things at Chelsea before being fired. And he actually was brought back to the club for another stint later on in his career. And today's random piece of trivia for you is I expect Chelsea is the only club in the world that has a ban on a specific vegetable at their stadium. To give you 3 players from their past, let's start with Didier Drogba, the man on the back of this kit, and the pivotal player in the 2012 Champions League final. Second, Frank Lampard, a box-to-box midfielder and their all-time leading goal scorer. And finally, keeping in our tradition of looking at Chelsea's past in this video, I'll mention that Steve Clarke, the current Scotland manager, is a defender for the club through most of his career. Let's take a look at their current squad by talking about Reece James first, a right back, who's one of the best in England at the moment, and that's saying something since the national team has a wealth of incredible right backs. Second, a little further forward, let's talk about Mason Mount, who is an attacking midfielder, is really improving season to season. And finally, I think that Chelsea is doing pretty decent transfer business this window, having brought in Raheem Sterling from City, as well as former Neapolitan defender Kalidou Koulibaly. So that's your first taste of Chelsea FC. There's a lot of things that we touched on from the past. If there are things in the current century that I missed here, because there obviously are, let me know in the comments what's important to you.